fact, there is no evidence in this case because Toole was in Jacksonville, Florida on the day of the killing.
You can say, but he was innocent. I know he was. He was home with me. But they always look at that, you know, and say, well, they just don't tend to believe you.
Yes, I have always maintained that he is guilty, and I maintain that he is guilty today. And quite frankly, nothing that I have heard or seen or read, excerpts from transcripts or parts of transcripts or anything else, at this point makes me prone to change my mind.
It's September 19th, 1974, and one of the most brutal murders to take place in Colorado Springs occurs at a massage parlor. Soon-Ok's cousin is raped, shot, and set on fire. Her companion, Elizabeth Lee Young Cha, is stabbed and set on fire. 8 weeks later, this man, Park Estep, is arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In March of 1975, he's convicted, but not before a first jury vote of 10-2 for acquittal. The jury asked for leniency. Estep is sentenced to 48 to 67 years in prison. In 1977, an appeals court overturns the ruling, specifically citing Judge Hunter Hardiman's decision not to allow a defense witness to testify about significant aspects of Korean culture affecting the witness' testimony, and DA Bob Russell's questioning of a witness when he asked, "You were never with him when he was in the process of killing somebody, were you?" Despite the ruling by the appellate court, the decision is overruled by the Colorado Supreme Court, which says, in effect, the law doesn't require a perfect trial. Then in August of 1984, new light is shed on the case when serial killer Ottis Toole confesses to the murder for which Park Estep has been convicted. But not more than a month later, the confession becomes questioned.
Ottis, these are two documents. These are not a lot. We have police officers in testify to this case.
I'm pleased.
You agree?
I'm pleased.
I didn't hear what you said.
That's what I believe.
You agree? So you didn't, in fact, kill this woman, did you? What?
No.
You didn't.
I mean, how did I pick up the whole thing?
Yeah, how did you do that? I mean, it's amazing.
That is, really. The what?
He says that is. How about the key in the door? That was a beautiful one. How did you know about that?
The key was in the door.
And despite the confession and Toole's knowledge of certain aspects of the crime, the prosecution maintains it's had the right man all along.
When you have a person with the same blood type who has assaulted one of the victims, and that was the deceased victim, Mrs. Cousin, when you have a person who is known to frequent massage parlors, and that came out in trial, and in fact went to massage parlors at various times of the day and night to take photographs of the masseuses, and generally was turned down in that. When you have a person who has a .38 special weapon, which is what the death weapon was, when you have a person who has spear shot shell, and that is a very unique type of shotgun shell that is fired out of a revolver. Not very many people have it, and there was evidence to the effect in the trial that it was a very rare type of ammunition in those days. And then you have a person who owns a truck that has been pegged by two independent witnesses as being at the scene at the time this event went down, and has been also identified by the surviving victim. And then when you have the identification of the surviving victim herself, made, by the way, in a photographic lineup. First time Park Estep was ever figured into this, a picture was taken of him. It was mixed in with 12 or 13 other pictures. Miss Lee had already been shown over 100 Polaroid photographs and no reaction from any of them. But the very first time Park Estep's picture is put out in a lineup of 12 others, she picks him out, turns her face away and says, "That's the one." Then she identifies him in a lineup in the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, the old lineup room, which is now, I guess, is the Detective Division room. Out of 5 other people, picks him out, almost got physically ill, and then identifies him in the courtroom proceedings.
However, to some, it's never been a black and white situation. And those people continue to raise questions about the original investigation and ensuing trial. One of them is defense investigator Jerry Mosier, who's been working on the case for the last 10 years.
Once you release that description, you're going to get somebody that looks like that person. You're going to get a lot of people. The police say, oh, we were totally fair and unbiased. There was no frame job. We showed her over 100 photographs. How do you have 100 legitimate suspects to that crime? It wasn't an Agatha Christie murder that happened on a crowded train with hundreds of people, any one of whom could have done it. It was one man, seen by one woman.
Detective Lou Smit was the chief investigator in the case, but declined to talk with us on camera because of his current involvement. Other questions surround the identification of a red pickup seen outside the parlor by two GIs the night of the incident. That's one of the things that led police to Estep. However, the original traffic report described the assailant's vehicle as white.
Citizens in white pickups were pulled from their pickups at gunpoint to have their ID checked. That was the description. Subsequently, in a matter of a day or two or three, the description just kind of becomes a red pickup truck, and there's no real explanation as to how that change was made.
I don't remember her describing it as a white pickup truck. What I do remember is that she was interviewed while still undergoing treatment for her wounds by a person the police got a hold of who sort of spoke Korean. Whether she said that or whether the interpreter misinterpreted what she said, and that is not the interpreter that was used at trial, I don't know. I don't ever remember seeing anything about a white pickup truck.
Was the truck white, and how did it become red the following morning when police are interviewing Miss Lee from her hospital bed? Question: on September 20th, 1974 at 10 a.m., did the police tell you, Miss Lee, they had a description of a truck and that the truck was red? Yes, I told them the truck is red and something in white in back. My question is, Miss Lee, did the police tell her that they had a description of the truck and the truck was red? Answer: yes. The original description questioned the color of the truck, but was Park Estep's truck even the same one two witnesses had seen?
The two young fellows who described the truck said that since they're Fort Carson, they looked to see if there was a Fort Carson sticker, and there was none on the truck. And Park's truck had a Fort Carson sticker. They also said that the truck they saw didn't have a gross weight sticker on the left front fender, and Park's did, because his truck was purchased in one of the Dakotas. The boys described a custom-made construction-type steel bumper on the back with, you know, the grid pattern or whatever. Park's rear bumper was smooth, white, a custom Luverne factory-made bumper. The boys described all of those differences between the two trucks, and yet when asked if it was the same truck, oh yes, it was the same truck.
I remember one of the two GIs, not both of them, one of the GIs saying he didn't notice the Carson sticker on the truck subsequently, but nevertheless he identified that truck. You know, I don't know whether he would notice a Carson sticker in semi-darkness or not semi-darkness. Don't forget, this thing went down at around 10 o'clock at night. This wasn't a broad daylight type of thing.
They looked for the kind of things that I think a couple of GIs would have looked for. They looked for a Fort Carson sticker. They looked for a gross weight sticker because they were used to seeing those things. And they didn't see them, and they remembered noticing that. Well, then the truck that they later identified as the one that they'd seen down there, that is Park Estep's truck, wasn't the truck they saw.
In-court identification of Park Estep was an obvious plus for the prosecution's case.
Yes.
However, it did lead to the first of two calls for a mistrial.
Throughout that entire questioning session of Miss Lee, she was looking down at her feet in the witness box. Everybody was looking at her, but she was looking at her feet. She was receiving questions that had been asked in English, in Korean, through this court-appointed interpreter. She went through the whole litany of what had happened, and then came up to the final punchline question: do you see the man that did all these horrible things to you in court? And Stan Tabor was asking the question. And the question was translated, and she looked up and looked around and said, "I can't see from here." At least that's the way the translation came back. Tabor started to panic and said, "Now I ask you again," and this is being translated, "do you see the man?" And he started to walk over toward Estep and stand behind him and motion toward him. Well, she never saw that. The defense objected as soon as he started moving, and as soon as he started moving his arm in the general direction of Estep. And They asked for a mistrial. Tabor re-asked the question, and Miss Lee pointed out Estep with no equivocation at all.
We pick up that sequence through questioning from prosecutor Stan Tabor during the original trial. Question: Miss Lee, do you see this man that did this to you in the courtroom? Can I stand up and look around? Yes, you may. I can't see from here. Fine. Miss Lee, would you walk up? It was at that point the defense called for a mistrial. The jury was dismissed, Miss Lee was excused, and the discussion of the matter continued. After the judge denied the motion and a nearly 20-minute recess, court resumed, and Miss Lee was asked to walk around the courtroom and then ask once again if she could identify the man who did this to her. At that point, she identified the defendant. Another question to come from the trial was the denial by Judge Hardiman for a defense witness to talk about Korean culture. Now 17th District Court Judge and then legal counsel at Fort Carson, Richard Borchers, feels the testimony about Korean culture was crucial.
But having been to Korea, knowing the problems that I had experienced there, dealing with Koreans and Korean witnesses, I knew the problems that you had to be aware of. Korean society believes that if the elders in a village believe that something occurred or someone did it, then everyone believes that. Consequently, that translates also into the problem that those in authority, if a Korean believes that a particular person in authority, a policeman, soldier, someone who's with the government, believes something is the case, and they also would in fact believe it's the case. So we would have to be very careful in interviewing Koreans. We would have to go ahead and specifically allow them just simply to tell our story. Never ask anything that was remotely leading or suggestive in any way, shape, or form. The Estep case may be a classic if the wrong questions were asked or any questions of a suggestive nature were asked of the woman who almost died, the eyewitness. If she had any type of suggestion whatsoever, then it tainted everything else from that point forward, or could have.
Borchers also questions the photo identification of Estep and continual references during the trial that the attacker did not have a mustache.
Most of Korean society does not have any facial hair. No one who's young. It's a sign of dignity and wisdom. If the woman had initially identified the assailant as having no facial hair, no mustache, then the person who attacked her did not have a mustache. Park Estep did.
Miss Lee repeatedly said every time that she identified Park Estep, from that first time she identified his Polaroid photo right through the trial, she said, yeah, this is the man, but except that when he did this, he didn't have a mustache. Well, he did, and therefore if she was right that her attacker didn't have a mustache, then she was wrong that it was Park Estep.
Estep had a mustache. There was some question as to how heavy his mustache was. Some people said, well, it always looked like it did at the time of trial. Well, at the time of trial, it was considerably heavier than it was at the time he was arrested. There was some confusion as to whether she said he didn't have a mustache or I don't remember the mustache. I quite frankly don't know how that got reconciled.
It's concerns such as these and new leads that have kept defense investigators busy over the last 10 years and continued to raise questions about the guilt of Park Estep and if there is indeed reasonable doubt. However, the 24-hour days started all over again for both the defense and prosecution when Ottis Toole confessed to the murder. A confession defense investigator, Bob Brown, continues to believe because of Toole's knowledge of the crime. Similarities such as his knowledge that there were 2 Oriental women, that he referred to the building as a steam bath with fancy lettering on the front, that when he entered, he locked the door behind him, pulled the curtains, and turned the open sign to closed, that money was taken from a tin can in the kitchen, that one victim was shot and another stabbed. He knew that one victim had been set on fire and raped, admitted to investigators that they would find his A blood type in the raped victim, said he carried a .38 revolver, admitted to owning a white pickup in 1974, and was able to describe the interior and exterior of the building when the crime occurred.
He was told repeatedly in the alleged recantation that nothing that he has shown them or told them was accurate or even close, which was not true. Because in the exterior diagram that he drew was absolutely unbelievable, because he even went as far as to draw in 3 houses across the street. He drew in the streets, Nevada and Tejon. And he has the massage parlor facing the exact way that massage parlor sits. And again, he is told, nothing is even accurate.
The prosecution also claims Toole's sketch of the interior made during an interview with Lou Smit was totally inaccurate.
There is a stare-down situation between Lou Smit and Ottis Toole. Ottis Toole reaches over after a period of time and looks at Lou Smit, and he turns this exact diagram that he had just drawn for Lou, he turns it around and says, I have these backwards, which when he turned the diagram around, it made it exact. He had the living room in the right place, the windows in the right place, and had it exact.
The defense later corroborated Toole's confession after his partner and homosexual lover, Henry Lucas, told both prosecution and defense investigators that Toole had been in Colorado Springs during that time. Police investigator Lou Smit talked with Lucas on September 14th.
He said, like, sort of, I guess you call it box fights, that's what I call it. It's an old type house. And he put the girl into the living room in the house, and he poured his stuff all over again. And he set her on fire. And the time he got out to the car and everything, all the house was in flames, you know.
No, this was before he mentioned.
Yeah.
Then on October 3rd, defense investigators followed up with an audio interview.
Okay, and you say it's south of Denver?
South of Denver, north of Seattle.
In between?
Yeah.
Okay. What size of city would you say?
Pretty good size. Good size place.
Okay. And that is the one that he's telling you that there was a robbery and...
Yeah. He said he was hot in that town, and he done an armed robbery in that site. He said he was out there and shoot the people or people. I don't know which it was.
Well, do you know the name of the city if I told you?
Well, let me think. Maybe I can even give it to you.
Okay. Who prefers
Something about Springs or something like that. Colorado Springs or something like that. I'm not sure. Something like that.
But despite this information, the prosecution maintains that Toole could not have been in Colorado because relatives say he was in Jacksonville on that same date.
All I know is that he has subsequently recanted his confession, said that he lied, and the evidence that the district attorney found is that he was in Jacksonville, Florida, taking care of replacing tires on his mother's pickup truck that had been slashed, and then his sister and her father had put him there. So to me, I don't see that that's something to overturn a jury verdict.
Sarah Pierce, number one, would have been 11 or 12 years old at that time. She has an extensive criminal record. Frank Powell certainly has no love for Ottis Toole or Henry Lucas because Lucas killed his daughter. Sarah Pierce has no love for either one of them because Lucas killed her sister. So they have these two people that they're saying, Ottis, you were in Jacksonville.
Brown also points out the only solid evidence that Toole was in Florida at that time is a September 24th police report when Toole was stopped by Jacksonville police.
The most significant thing is that the clothing description on an official police contact record report that was made by the police officer describes the exact same type of clothing that the assailant was wearing on September 19th, 1974.
Questions have obviously been raised about the trial and the latest information concerning the Toole and Lucas interviews. And as could be expected, both sides continue to hold firm.
And I think anybody that reads or the transcript or reviews the recantation would agree that he was led from the very beginning, he was misled, and he was actually told things that were certainly not true to convince him that what they were saying was factual.
Yes, there's enough evidence for a new trial. I think there's enough evidence for there not to be a new trial. I think that the evidence that Ottis Toole did this murder is conclusive enough. Let's quit playing with it. Let's read it, Governor Lamb, Judge Hardiman. Let's quit holding ourselves in unbiased, pristine ignorance and find out the facts, and you won't be so darn unbiased, because the facts are very biased in favor of the truth, and the truth is that Ottis Toole did this murder.
And I just quite frankly, Clark, have not seen or read in synthesized transcripts or excerpts out of transcripts, certainly not Mr. Toole's confession, which has since been recanted, anything that indicates to me that he is not guilty. I will go back to what I said 4 months ago or 3 months ago when this started. At such time as I do see anything like that, I'll be the first one to admit it.
The job of the district attorney is to seek justice, but that also includes seeking the truth. We sought the truth, and we got a conviction in Park Estep. We sought the truth in relationship to whether or not the statement of Toole was correct or not correct. And we went down there and we found that it was not correct. It was incumbent upon me as the chief law enforcement elected official in this town to determine the truth of that. And I had to make those decisions and I had to make those judgments. And so I went down there to make sure. And I came back finding that they have new evidence.
The question was asked of me by a reporter. The fact that Toole had recanted or reportedly recanted, did that make any difference to me? And I said no, because I had felt all along that he was innocent, that Park was innocent, and the fact that Toole may have confessed or now may have unconfessed or partially unconfessed didn't make any difference, that I still believe that Park was innocent.
A question that has now been placed in the lap of new District Attorney Barney Iupa, who defeated Bob Russell in the November election. An election in which Iupa charged Russell with using the Toole recant for political purposes. Iupa says he's reviewed all of the available material and will vigorously oppose the motion for a new trial.
On the information that was available to me up to this point in time, I made my decision. That included additional evidence, that an additional investigation that is continuing. For example, still are forensic tests that are being conducted by the CBI on additional evidence that was found in Mr. Estep's home after the trial, and that is being coordinated with Mr. Tegmeyer so that he can have an expert of his choice to observe the testing of those items. So, of course, there is a continuing investigation and an ongoing investigation on the part of the District Attorney's Office.
Governor Lamb has also reviewed much of the latest material on the case and has talked with both the defense and prosecution. However, he feels something more concrete must be presented before he can act.
I hate the thought of an innocent person possibly sitting in jail, but I hate also the thought of the fact that he's been convicted by the American judicial system, and there's a dispute as to whether or not that really was wrong.
Where does a reasonable doubt come into play? We've talked to the new district attorneys in this. Is it a personal thing, or how does that work?
Well, I think that it's a very important question for the judicial system, but I don't think it's an important question for the governor. I think that people are entitled to the benefit of a reasonable doubt, and he's been given one, and he's been convicted by an American jury. Then the question is under what standards do I exercise clemency powers? And I think a governor has to be very careful in exercising clemency power.
Facts and information can be tossed around forever, and oftentimes there's no clear-cut choice. Unfortunately, in situations such as this, we often forget about the personal lives of friends and relatives that have been affected over the years.
Perhaps those closest to the Esteps when they first came to Colorado Springs were members of the Highland Park Baptist Church, a congregation that has always given its support.
People really did not have a relationship of any significance with him prior to his arrest because he had been here so short a time, or they had as a family. And therefore, I think that the support was one of a concern that grew out of our belief that he was not involved in the crime at all.
Stacy Rose is the daughter of Nan Rose, who tried to visit Park at least once a month since he was incarcerated at Canyon City.
The thing I remember most about their relationship was her belief in him. She used to get really frustrated after she had visited him and we were walking out. She would always say, "It's not fair that I can walk out of here and he can't, when I don't believe he is any more guilty than I am."
Stacy's mother died of cancer in the fall of 1984. Permission to attend the funeral was one of Estep's few tastes of the outside world in the last 10 years. However, her death has not stopped the family visits.
I do believe in him. I don't feel pressured to. It's something you either believe in him or you don't. And there's not really much you can do to change that.
so I do go see him and write to him and try and keep in contact and do for him what I can.
It's this belief, shared by friends outside the prison walls, that takes us nearly 1,000 miles from here.
It's 25 degrees and there's snow on the ground. Nothing unusual for this time of year here in Minnesota. But what's unique about this small dairy farm is that the lives of the people living there have been greatly affected by the Park Estep case.
At this point, I have to say, well, if it works out, wonderful. That'll be just great. But you lose a certain amount of that faith. I'm not sure it's faith or just, you don't want to hope. You don't want to let your hopes get up there because you're afraid of being hurt again.
Roseanne, or Roxy as she's known by friends in Colorado Springs, remarried nearly 6 years ago after she and Park agreed to a divorce. She and her new husband, Jeff, run a dairy farm in Minnesota, along with their 2 children, and Park and Roxy's daughter, Miriam. A unique relationship where all 3 discuss what will happen if Park is someday released.
I don't see any problems with it. I really don't. Jeff has girls from his first marriage, and they come up here. They're welcome. I love them like my own kids. Park is welcome to see Miriam whenever. She'll go and visit him, the same as Jeff's girls come here. It's a normal, natural thing. I don't
see any change.
I don't see any problems or change.
Other than it being probably a little better for Miriam getting the chance to be with him, and
We've never hidden anything from her as far as what's happening or anything. She knows where her father is. She knows, why he's there.
She's been there to visit him several times.
She's been in the prison ever since she was a very small baby, lots and lots of times. And I think that it would be really wonderful if she could spend some time with him and get to know him. And Park said he wanted to take her camping. I think that'd be great.
None of us are the same people we were 10 years ago. And that's not necessarily bad. It's...
We've grown a lot in that much time. We've learned a lot. And as far as bitterness, yeah, I have some feelings once in a while, but I don't think they're the major thing. I think more it's accepting than anything else, accepting things that you can't change.
The bitterness has kind of passed, and now it's, like she said, accepting and living with it and taking what comes.
Yeah.
If I'd stayed bitter for 10 years, I probably wouldn't be alive. I probably wouldn't have stayed bitter for 10 years because I wouldn't have survived it. But even if I had, it would have just eaten me up to the point that I wouldn't be any good to myself or anybody else. You can either laugh about it or cry about it. Crying doesn't do any good at all and leaves your eyes red. And that's the same thing's true of bitterness. It doesn't do any good to be bitter.
But how does Park Estep deal with life after 10 years in prison?
This is going to sound trite, but one day at a time.